Good evening, Ayman. Good evening, Vanshika. I am Rahul Saha, and in the last class we were discussing biodiversity and conservation. Especially, we were discussing about the components we had discussed about the ecosystem and also, sorry, of the biodiversity, and also we had discussed the different types of IUCN red lists from commencing from extinction to extinct in the wild, critically endangered, vulnerable, lower risk, also the rare species, also the data deficient and non-evaluated. Then also we had commenced the discussion regarding towards the later part, we had started or commenced the discussion about conservation of biodiversity. So I had mentioned the objectives for you. So there were three objectives, right? To maintain essential ecological processes and life supporting systems like air, water, or soil and soil, to preserve the diversity of species or the range of genetic material of world's organisms, and to ensure a continuous use of or everlasting use of species and keep the ecosystems intact and stable. So in today's class we will be continuing from here. So the conservation strategy, if I talk about conservation strategy, so when we come to conservation strategy, it is a comprehensive world conservation strategy for the judicious use of natural resources, okay, and contains the proposed following steps to protect the wildlife. If you want to protect the wildlife, like we have to follow the common, you can say common sense oriented following steps. Number one is protection. When it comes to protection, protection means what? You need to protect the useful animals and plants. Useful animals and plants are needed to be safeguarded or protected, okay, and their wildlife relatives also, both in their natural habitat, which is known as in situ. The natural habitat is referred to as in situ, means wherever you live, if you are protected there, that is in situ, okay, in situ. And in, you can say, zoological or botanical gardens, that is they have been taken out from their natural habitat and kept in a protected area, that is known as XII. You can say zoological park / XII, means you have to protect these in both the types of habitat, XII also, in situ also, means in situ conservation, XII conservation. Point number B is preservation of critical habitats. Very important. First number was protection, here preservation of critical habitats. In case of critical habitats, the feeding, the breeding, the nursery or the resting areas of the plants, the feeding area, the breeding area, I can say. Then I can talk about the resting area. Of plants and animals. You need to promote their growth and multiplication. If you are interested at all at saving the biodiversity, at saving the species richness, right, then one should be protecting these specific areas, the feeding areas, the breeding areas inside the or residing within the habitat for certain plants and animals, if those animals are reaching the vulnerable or the endangered region. Because that's the region of danger, that's the region at high risk, then you can go into extinct in the wild and finally you can reach extinction, right? Then priority should be given in wildlife conservation program to endangered species. So if I talk about priority, that is again a simple common sense application. Whom should be prioritized? Which species should be given maximum priority? So maximum priority must be bestowed upon the endangered species. They are the closest species towards becoming extinct, or first of all they'll become extinct in the wild. Okay. Next one, they will be there will be species which are known as vulnerable. Okay. So the vulnerable species, they are not yet endangered, but they have reached the vulnerability, known as vulnerable species. They are not yet extinct, but if we do not stop, if we do not cease their, you can say, abuse of their habitat, reduction or dip in their number. So what will happen is eventually these things will lead to these specific detrimental factors will lead them to enter the endangered category. Okay, and then again they will be high risk, they will be under high risk and they may enter the extinct in the wild and finally they may become completely extinct. Okay, so in order to achieve all these things, okay, the management of life supporting systems, air, water, land must be our penultimate aim. Also, hunting should be regulated. The hunting action, it leads to a lot of extinction, lot of, you can say, limitation, lot of dipping in the number of individuals of a specific certain species. Thereby, it can become vulnerable. It can reach endangered from the vulnerable status. So those things do happen at a rapid pace if hunting is allowed ceaselessly. So hunting must be regulated at all costs. And how will you regulate hunting? What are the points to it? Okay. So it should involve the following steps. Number one is only the licensed person should be allowed to hunt. Right? Not any random guy should be, you can say, allowed to hunt. You can say no, any random guy cannot be allowed to hunt. Only the licensed individuals should be allowed to hunt. Number two, hunting of young animals should be prohibited completely. Hunting of young animals should be prohibited because it has a lot of potential to reach the reproductive phase and to cause proliferation. Once you're old enough, once you have passed your reproductive phase, like in the age distribution thing regarding the characteristic of the population that I taught you, one of the points is age distribution. So once you have passed your reproductive phase, then even if you die, you are only reducing the number, okay, via death rate, natality rate, but you are not causing any other side effect, like you are not causing any other, you can say, adverse effect by taking out an individual who could have reproduced a lot and who could have or who had the potential to transfer favorable genes to its offspring and thereby leading to positive reproductive differential success, right? So you are not taking that away from any specific population comprising of a certain species. Then hunting in breeding season should be banned again, right? Hunting in breeding season should be banned. Then hunting of threatened species should be banned. Endangered species should be banned. Vulnerable species should be banned. So hunting of threatened species must be banned. Then a limit should be imposed also on the number of animals to be hunted upon. Very, very important point. Must have a threshold limit. Should be imposed upon the number of animals being hunted. Being hunted. Okay. So these are the points. Okay, if you want to know more point, you can say the habitats of migratory birds, you can say, should be protected by bilateral or multilateral agreements between certain countries or among certain countries. Okay, that can also be done. Then educating the people about the importance of wildlife and its conservation, that can be done. Okay, the over exploitation of useful products which we get from wildlife, okay, that should be avoided. Okay, and the species and ecosystems, the species and ecosystems should not be exploited at what criteria or at what level? Should not be exploited at any cost beyond their productive capacities. Okay, they shall not increase their carrying capacity. Okay, if you reach the biotic potential, then means you will be overusing the resources, and that will lead to the depletion of the habitat or environment itself. So productive capacity is a thing that keeps the biotic potential in check. So it should not be abused. You should not, you can say, use specific hormones for more overproduction of a species, which is being done at this level. Okay, in nowadays it is being done. Genetic engineering, genetically modified organisms which will exceed their, you can say, puberty rate, or it will cause higher, or you can say, earlier onset of puberty, maximum growth in less time, and then making them reproductively capable and causing longer ranges of reproductive stage. That should not be done again. Okay, therefore the ecosystem should be protected on priority basis. So these are the things that should be considered whenever talking about conserving any biodiversity or specifically ecosystem. Okay, so we have certain organizations that we have talked about. Okay, so there were three objectives were identified, very, very important. Three specialized objectives were identified when it comes to the 1992 Earth Summit, which was held at Rio de Janeiro, which is situated in Brazil. Okay, and which is also known as the foundation for the, you can say, passing of the bill known as the Convention of Biodiversity, which came into effect from 29 or 29th December 1993. Three major objectives were identified, okay, which were then, you can say, accentuated by the international efforts for conservation of wildlife. Number one is sustainable use of biodiversity. We talk about always sustainable development, so sustainable use of biodiversity. No overusage at all, at any cost. Number two is conservation of biodiversity, very important. That was the entire article I taught about conservation of biodiversity right now. Okay. Then third objective is justified sharing. This is very, very important. justified sharing of benefits appear due to use of genetic resources, means from genetic engineering. Justified sharing, not, you can say, partial sharing, no over exploitation, right? It is known as, that is the meaning of this specific sentence, justified sharing. Even if a specific company has introduced that they should be sharing justifiably, okay, not only making all the profit for itself. So we have different organizations, okay, we have these organizations, the name of these organizations are asked frequently in board examination, not only in NEET, but in board examination very frequently. So I'll tell you some organization names. Number one is IUCN, that you might be knowing. I had discussed this. I'll write the full form: the International Union for Conservation of International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. For conservation of nature and natural resources. Number two, if you know, we have something known as WWF also. It's not World Wrestling, you can say, Federation. It is known as World Wildlife Fund. It was established in 1961 in Switzerland and was chosen, something was chosen as the symbol of World Wide Fund. So that is also asked in question. So both of these organizations were established in, or they are headquartered in the country, the European country, the beautiful country of Switzerland. And the giant panda, okay, the giant panda, even the scientific name is asked in NEET, even in board examination, known as Eleuropoda melancholica. You can say melanoleuca. So that's the scientific name of giant panda, which is the symbol, the ultimate symbol for the World Wide Fund. This is the symbol, always know, this is the symbol for, or symbol of, you can say, WWF. Okay. So WWF has a membership of a group of national organizations representing 23 countries, and our own nation, India, is one of the members of World Wide Fund. So India established its WWF, we can say, associated headquarters in Mumbai, which was earlier known as Bombay. Okay. So the important projects undertaken by India regarding WWF are, you can say, the Andaman pig study, Andaman pig study. Then you have crane conservation project. Then you have crocodile breeding project. You have multiple, I'll give you some examples here. Crocodile breeding project. Then you have something known as ecological survey of Western Ghats, very important, one of the hot spots, right, of Western Ghats. You have more, you have sloth bear project, you have status survey of sea turtle, okay, that I'm not mentioning here, that is enough. So I'll give you now some of the other full forms of the various acronyms. One is IBWL. It is all, these are asked in NEET examination. So IBWL is Indian Board for Wildlife. Indian Board for wildlife. Always remember IBWL. Then we have BNHS. BNHS, the Bombay Natural History Society. Okay. The Bombay Natural History Society. Then we have WPSI. That is the Wildlife Preservation Society of India. Preservation Society of India. Then you have CPCB, again very important, Central Pollution Control Board. Control Board. Okay. Then you have UNEP, one of the very important things in when it comes to acronym, United Nations Environment Program. Directly controlled by United Nations Organization UNO. United Nations Environment Program. Then you have UNDP. There are others also, I am stating only the significant ones. United Nations Development Program. Nations Development Program. Then you have ZSI, Zoological Survey of India. Okay, so you have many others. Okay, you have PETA, People for PETA. You must be knowing. PETA is very important. Comes in examination. People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. You must be noticing a lot of ambassadors, mainly Hollywood ambassadors. They become the ambassador of PETA, and they volunteer for any kind of ethical treatment to animals. We should not be disregarding animals, we should not be kicking animals and exploiting animals. Even when it comes to street dogs, we should be treating them with respect. If you are not able to feed them, we have no right to beat them up. So that is the thing that PETA is trying to make, or it is trying to substantiate, come into or bring into effect some kind of strict stipulations regarding the exploitation of animals. You cannot just randomly beat up an animal for your own, you can say, recreation. So People for Ethical, they deserve as much respect as we do. Every species has the equal amount of right on this planet Earth. Just because we have much more brain matter, grey matter, 86 billion neurons in our brain, CNS, doesn't mean that we owe every species. Okay, that doesn't mean that we own every species. That doesn't mean that we really have any kind of, or we should be taking really any kind of undue advantage. None of the species owe us anything, right? They are all independent species. They all deserve to live, and they all deserve to live a quality life. We have no right to strangulate somebody or encroach into somebody's habitat or some other species' habitat, or just for our own recreational purposes have some fun by beating them up, by harassing them. So we should not be indulging in those kinds of activities. Okay, so that is the sole purpose behind this great international organization, where it has had multiple Hollywood, you can say, ambassadors. Okay, continuously it keeps on doing. Okay, so India is with various biogeographical provinces ranging from, you can say, cold deserts of Ladakh, okay, to the hot deserts of Thar, the temperate forest in Himalaya, to the, you can say, lush green tropical rainforest in the Kerala. Okay, So India has also got large freshwater bodies such as the Vular and the municipal lakes in you can say the beautiful Kashmir, and the Chilka Lake in Odisha, the Koleru Lake in Andhra Pradesh, okay, and also rich coastline and coastal reefs of the Deccan. So Indian Board for Wildlife, IBWL, it was constituted in 1952, and the main functions I'll just tell you about the IBWL. Okay, the main functions or the main objectives, okay, of IBWL are functions. Number one, to sponsor the setting up of national park. Sponsor the setting up of national park. Sanctuaries, wildlife sanctuaries and botanical gardens. Sanctuaries and gardens. They all come under in situ conservation. Number two, to devise means for protection of wildlife. For protection of wildlife. Number three, to promote public interest in wildlife. Public interest in wildlife. So if public interest develops, we can get various kinds of, you can say, donations. We can get them to be streamlined and then form various kinds of national parks, or you can say wildlife sanctuaries, or even can distribute food to the needy. You can say dogs and cats and cows, buffaloes who are roaming on the streets, right? We can provide food to the needy in this, and they do not have to face these atrocious conditions. They do not have to feed on anything random plastic and utter wastes. So we can uplift, we can enhance their lifestyle. So the thing is, coming on to the conservation of biodiversity and management systems, we have something known as in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. So I'll give you a table. This is the most important table in this chapter. So biodiversity conservation, if I write biodiversity conservation management systems, it can be divided into in situ conservation. I'll explain each and every detail to you. You can note down this table. In situ conservation and ex situ conservation is a very systematic tabulated form that I am giving you. Ex situ conservation. Now, in situ conservation would be further divided into protected area network. Okay, here directly you can go on to making biosphere reserves. Or you can go for national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. Wildlife sanctuaries. Or you can go for sacred forests and sacred lakes. And sacred lakes. Under biosphere reserves, you have something like terrestrial. Okay, you have something like marine. Under XII conservation, we have something like sacred plants and home gardens. Home gardens, seed banks, then field gene banks. Okay, field gene banks. Then we have cryopreservation and tissue culture also. Cryopreservation, then tissue culture. Then we have one more where I can include botanical gardens, zoos, etc. Botanical, botanical gardens. You can and zoos. So this is the tabulated form that you should be knowing about the biodiversity conservation management systems. We have in situ, ex situ, and these two are further divided into the following mentioned types. Now coming on to what is in situ conservation. Okay. So in situ conservation means on-site conservation. In situ means on-site. If I write about in situ conservation, it means on-site conservation. Meaning that here the plant or animal species are protected in their natural habitat. Okay, it is protected in their natural habitat only. They are not taken out of their natural habitat. So this is carried out by two methods. Okay, plants or animals in their natural habitat. It can be done by two methods. Number one is either by protecting or cleaning up the habitat itself, habitat itself. Number two, by defending the species from predators. That can also be done in order to keep the level or the species number of that specific species in that specific population from plummeting any further. So defending the species from predators. Okay. Then protected areas in India. So what all can occur? What all do we have in India and what all did I tell you? I have told you about national parks, wildlife sanctuaries and biosphere reserves. So what is a sanctuary? What is a national park? What is a biosphere reserve? Okay. So when we come to national park, we have a proper definition for a national park. These are asked in board examination, very, very important stuff. A national park is an area which is strictly reserved for the betterment of the wildlife. And where activities like forestry, grazing, or cultivation are not permitted. These kinds of activities are completely prohibited in wildlife. You cannot go for forestry, you cannot take your animals for grazing, you cannot go for any kind of agricultural activity inside a national park. These are completely prohibited. Okay, it is completely and strictly reserved for only the enhancement, for only the upliftment. Betterment means the number of species shall be maintained properly. They should be allowed to proliferate properly, reproduce properly, mate properly. Okay, so there are about 66 national parks in India as per the 1988 survey, which nearly you can say comprises of 1% of the country's geographical area. Okay, so as per the 1993 survey, the national parks were 75 in number. So some of the main national parks are the Kaziranga National Park in Assam. You have the Sundarbans Tiger Reserve. Okay, in West Bengal, you have the Hazaribagh National Park in Bihar. You have the Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand. Then you have Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh. You have Gir National Park in Gujarat. So then you have the Desert National Park in Rajasthan. So these are one of the topmost national parks in India. So this is about national parks. Then we will switch our attention to sanctuaries. It has also got its own proper definition. So a sanctuary is a protected area which is reserved for the conservation of, listen to it very carefully, which is reserved for the conservation of only animals and human activities of only animals, okay, not plants. Conservation of only animals is the first point to be underlined here, and human activities like harvesting of timber, collection of minor forest products, and private ownership rights. Private ownership rights are allowed so long as they do not interfere with the well-being of animals. That is the most important line. The well-being of animals means you can indulge in the various activities like harvesting of timber, collection of minor forest products, okay, and also you can go for lending some land for private ownership rights until and unless or until no animal gets adversely affected when it comes to its health or well-being. No animal shall be killed, no animal shall be adversely affected when it comes to its mating or its natural resources where it is thriving upon, it should not be deteriorated. So these things must be kept in mind thoroughly, and then the action is taken with, you can say, complete thorough diligence. Then only these things are, you can say, approved, allowed. So as per 1992 record, there are 392 sanctuaries, and in 1993 the sanctuaries number got elevated to 421, and then it reached, you can say, I think it's almost 3.2% of the country's geographical area. It comprises of that much land. So you have Annamalai Sanctuary. You might have heard of Annamalai University in Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore. You have Jaldapra Sanctuary in West Bengal. You have Sultanpur Lake Bird Sanctuary in Haryana. You have Birmoti Bag Wildlife Sanctuary in Punjab. Right? You have multiple ones. You have Nagarjuna Sagar Sanctuary in Andhra Pradesh. Okay. So many types of sanctuaries are there. So if you want to differentiate, the difference also can come. Differentiate between a national park and a sanctuary. So what are you supposed to write? So that is reserved for the betterment of whole wildlife, plants and animals both. It is for only animals. Number one point of difference. Okay. Only animals are conserved here. Conservation of animals. Size range. If I talk about the size range, that is 0.04 to 3162 kilometer square. Okay. Here it is 0.61 to 7818 kilometer square, usually between 100 to 500 square kilometer, mostly. Okay. 100 to 500 square kilometer. Then boundaries are sacrosanct here. Boundaries are completely sacrosanct. Cannot alter the boundaries. Here boundaries are not sacrosanct, kind of flexible. Then again, human activities like forestry, grazing, cultivation are not permitted. Limited human activities like harvesting of timber, just like I told you, collection of minor forest products are permitted. It contains 1% of country's geographical area. It contains almost 3.2% of the country's geographical area. So these are the 4 differences that you can, 5 differences. The 5th one I just told because there is not enough space to write. So 3.2% of country's geographical area. So these are the main differences between the sanctuary or a sanctuary and a national park. Now we come to biosphere reserves. When we talk about biosphere reserves, so under the MAB, that is known as Man and Biosphere Program, UNESCO has established a number of biosphere reserves in the world. So the concept of biosphere reserves was launched only by Man and Biosphere Program MAB in 1975 for dealing with the conservation of ecosystems and genetic resources which are contained inside it or contained therein. Okay. So under that, UNESCO has studied the impact of human interference. Impact of human interference when it comes to pollution on biotic and also abiotic environments, and also conservation strategies pertaining to the present as well as future well-being of various resources. Okay, so that is what UNESCO has done. So United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization is UNESCO, if you don't know. Okay. Then by the definition, if you go, okay, again we should be writing the definition for board examination. We must be very, very precise. So a biosphere reserve is a specified area in which multiple use of the land is permitted. Okay? So when you keep on increasing or you keep on shifting from national park to you can sanctuary to biosphere reserve, so the land use permission you might be seeing or looking at a trend where the land use permission is significantly becoming more lenient. You are getting more and more permissions, right? So more and more things or more and more you can say encroachment is allowed. So that is what the trend looks like. So that's what I want you to concentrate on. So multiple use of the land is permitted by dividing it into certain zones. Okay. Each zone being specific for a particular activity. So here each zone is specific for a particular activity. So now I'll acquaint you with various zones which are present in a biosphere reserve. So next heading will be zones of a biosphere reserve. So we can discern or divide it into three zones. We can fragment it into, demarcate it into three zones. The number one zone is known as the core area. This one, this entire thing is known as core area. Okay. This is known as the buffer zone. Okay. This is known as the manipulation zone, the last one, or transition zone. Manipulation / transition zone. Okay, that is what the three zones are called. Now, what is a core zone? Okay, the core zone is at the center. Okay, so the core zone, when we talk about core zone, which is at the center. So first point is lies at the center. Here no human activity is allowed. It is legally protected. No human activity is allowed. Legally protected. Okay. You will be having legal consequences if you encroach in this area, right? Ramifications will be really hard to bear. So that is the meaning of, you can say, the core zone. Then we switch our attention to the buffer zone. The core zone, the buffer zone. In the buffer zone, what happens is, in this zone, limited human activities are allowed. Okay, it surrounds the core zone. here limited human activities are allowed. Now, we have something known as the manipulation zone or the transition zone. Okay, so coming on to manipulation slash transition zone. Okay, so here what happens is in this specific zone, multiple human activities are allowed. Multiple human activities are allowed. But ecology is not permitted to be disturbed. Only one specialized thing is ecology or ecological balance or the ecosystem stability or equilibrium shall not be disturbed. Ecological equilibrium or I should be saying ecological stability is not allowed to be disturbed, means you cannot be incessant or rampant with your intruding activities. You cannot go about killing any specific animal. You cannot go about destroying the entire natural resources. Thereby you will be deteriorating the resources which are inherently present in that specific habitat. Okay, and then you will be deteriorating the carrying capacity of that specific environment too. So you're not allowed to go beyond a certain level which will cause the stability to be adversely affected of that specific ecosystem, right? So that is the main or the core idea, the sole idea behind formation or behind demarcating a biosphere reserve into three separate zones, into three segregated zones. Now there are 14 biosphere reserves in India. The first biosphere reserve of the world was established in 1979. Okay, till May 2005, there were 425 biosphere reserves located in 95 countries. So, first biosphere reserve established in India is which one? Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. There are 14 in India. The first one should be knowing for NEET examination is the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, 1986. Biosphere Reserve. Established in 1986. Okay. So it is Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, you can say, has an area of about 5520 kilometers square and covers the states of three states, you can say, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and also Kerala. Okay, so you have the Sundarbans Biosphere Reserve with an area of 9630 kilometers square, which you can say covers a part of the Ganga and Brahmaputra river system in West Bengal. So, you have tons of biosphere reserves. Okay, you have Nanda Devi, you have Nokrek. Okay, out of the 14, you have Manas, you have Gulf of Mannar, Great Nicobar. So, the list goes on and on. So, what is the significance of biosphere reserves? Why are they important? So, when we talk about significance, of a biosphere reserve, So the concept of biosphere reserve is of immense value. Why? Because for conserving the gene pool resources of flora and fauna in the country, it is extremely important to set up a biosphere reserve and to serve as the benchmarks, the measuring stick for future studies. Okay. So one should think of it as it is established to conserve the entire gene pool, the sum total of all the allelic frequencies, or you can say all the allelic variations. So to conserve for present and future human race use, number one, present and future human race use. The diversity and integrity of biotic communities of plants must be conserved. So that is one of the other objectives. Okay, the diversity and integrity of biotic communities pertaining to plants and animals. Okay. Then to safeguard the genetic diversity of species, because I told you when we consider the founder effect, when we consider the bottleneck effect, what happens when the population undergoes a bottleneck? That time, due to a specific natural calamity or a pathogen, you can say the number of populations they greatly reduce. It sees or it you can say witnesses a specific population dip. So that population dip or the population demise, you can say, in a way that tends to take away the genetic variant. Suppose few species, few individuals were comprising of very, you can say, favorable genetic variants, alleles. So if they are dead, so are those, you can say, genetic variants which was the result of natural selection of, you can say, hundreds or thousands of years, right? So you have a population crash and this is the consequence. So you need to conserve the genetic diversity of the species. Again, you can say to provide areas for ecological and environmental research. Huge areas, so to provide areas or space for ecological and environmental research. So you have environmentalists, you have ecologists. So they need area. Their wet lab is the real experimental area where they can study the relationship and the ecological models, the growth curves which I have taught you, they can be substantiated here, right? So, and environmental research. So that could be done. Then to provide facilities for education and training to the interns, okay, that could be done. And promote economic development, okay. So it can cause more and more job, you can say, applications to be accepted, job opportunities to be created, those things can be done, okay. Then in the end we come to the sacred forests and sacred lakes. They are nothing but, you can say, some forest patches are being protected by tribals. Sacred forests and sacred lakes. So some forest patches are protected or are being protected, I should be saying, by the local residential tribals due to religious sanctity. Due to some association of some religious beliefs or religious sanctity, and are called as sacred forests. Okay. So such forests have been found to be most undisturbed because if you try to disturb them, the tribal people will revolt. They'll be rebellious. They'll show defiance against you, and they will not let you disturb that specific area, even not lay your entry or cause any kind of entry of any other or let anyone enter. You cannot put your foot inside that specific confined region. So that's a region of extreme confinement, you can say. So they are found to be most undisturbed and they are usually surrounded by most degraded landscapes. So such sacred forests in India are present in states like you can say Maharashtra, Karnataka, okay, Meghalaya. In Sikkim there is a lake known as, I cannot you can say pronounce properly because my you can say Hindi is not that great. So you have Kechilopandiri Lake, okay, has been declared a sacred lake by people, okay, because again it is related to some religious beliefs and thus protecting the aquatic flora and fauna in that specific lake. So that is again you can say kind of beliefs, okay, but that belief in turn leads to a greater good. It protects, it safeguards the forest or the lake, and thereby it is protecting against or it is prohibiting any kind of intrusion, any kind of encroachment, then it is really causing the proliferation of flora and fauna both and maintenance of the ecological stability there, and then the entire biodiversity will also be thus preserved. So I hope you are able to comprehend this lecture, and if you have had any kind of doubts, you can certainly ask me on my personal number. I will reply as soon as possible. In the next class, we will be discussing in detail about the XII conservation. Okay then.